Hi, my name is Jax, and welcome to Bellucci Studios. Today, I'd like to talk to you about how to develop a winning mentality. So, today we had breakfast at the restaurant, and I asked the waitress, does she think that the clients or the patrons coming to this restaurant will enjoy the meal, that they will have a good time at the restaurant, that they will enjoy the service? How will they feel about the entire experience at the restaurant? Now, subsequently, the experience that we had at this restaurant was really good. It's one of the best that we've had this month, and we found that, or at least for me, I found that I didn't really feel like I needed to know the waitress's name. We didn't meet the manager today, and that's a really good thing, because walking away from that breakfast, I felt good. I felt like I achieved what I wanted to from that breakfast, which was to eat and not to complain about anything. And there was nothing to complain about. It was a really really good experience. Something that came from this conversation that I had with the waitress is that I realized that although there is this idea of the win-win deal, although that idea does exist, and many people know about it, not all people do. And as a result, when you engage in conversation like this with people about whether or not they offer their clients a win-win deal, it's very difficult for them to succinctly say that yes, we offer a win-win deal, and we will ensure that we do our best to ensure that our clients have a really good experience at our establishment. So what are the types of deals that there are? And these deals are just basically social contracts. It's when you interact with someone, you either want something, or you want to sell them something, or you want to give them something. And what type of deals are you engaging in? Are you engaging in the win-win, the win-lose, or no deal? So those are the three types of deals that there are. And these three types, well, the first one, the win-win, there's a slight variation on it. Now, win-win is easy. We understand what that is. I win, and the person that I'm engaging with will also win. The variation on that is that the person presenting the deal wins in the short term and the long term, and the person who the deal is being presented to will maybe lose in the short term but win in the long term. Now, I don't particularly like that deal, but so whenever someone does present that deal to me, or I present that deal to someone, I try to negotiate it in such a way that I upgrade it to the highest form of the deal, which is the win-win. The next type of deal is the win-lose. And in this deal, there's the person presenting the deal will win in the short term and in the long term. And the person that the deal is being presented to will lose in the short term and in the long term. And it doesn't take rocket scientists to figure out that that's not the best way to deal with people. The variation on the win-lose is the person presenting the deal wins in the short term and the long term. The person who the deal is being made to will win in the short term, but in the long term there will be some consequences for that other person, or for both parties involved. And what happens with this win-lose deal is that when you make these kind of deals with people, where you win and they lose, in the long term they will eventually catch on, and that results in relationships being soured. It results in employees leaving companies, or else an employer firing an employee. And those aren't the kind of things that we want. Then there is the third type of deal, and that is no deal, which is also a deal. And you shouldn't be afraid to say that. So for me, when someone presents me with a win-lose deal, I try and upgrade it to a form, any one of the win-win scenarios where I win in the long term and the short term, and the person presenting the deal wins in the long term and the short term. Or the person presenting the deals wins in the long term and short term. If I'm take a loss in the short term and there's no way around that, then I want to ensure that I will win in the long term. Again, like I said, I always try to upgrade the deal to the highest form, which is the win-win. But we shouldn't be afraid to say, if we aren't happy with terms of the deal, we shouldn't be afraid to say no. No deal is also a deal. And for the longest time, I was I was afraid to say no. If I didn't like what I was hearing, I was afraid to say no for the longest time. And I started when I started accepting the fact that no is also an answer, both to hear it, other people tell me, well, sorry dude, we don't like what we're hearing, we're not gonna do it. When I started not being afraid of hearing no, as well as not being afraid to say no, I found that the speed of my life improved. And when you do this, you need to ensure that you are prepared for the consequences, either of trying to upgrade that deal, because you might want to upgrade the deal, and the person who's presenting the deal might say, I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen. And if you hear no, are you prepared for it? Are you prepared to say no? So the second part of this discussion deals with presenting. How do you present each one of these deals, or how are they presented to us? So the most common form of the deal that I found, and I think some people don't realize that they're doing this, the most common form is the win-lose, and it is the easiest to sell. It's absolutely the easiest one of the deals to sell, because what they tend to do when someone presents you with a no deal is they try and get you to focus on the short term. They don't want you to look at the long term results of what they are proposing. They just try and keep you right here in the short term, because that's what we like. We like to get things quickly. We don't like to struggle through things and eventually win. We want to win right now. They appeal to our immediate gratification. And this is a problem with the win-lose deal, that it is very easy to sell, because all that they appeal to is the immediate, the right now. But then we forget about the long-term effects, or the consequences down the line for engaging in that kind of deal. For instance, fast food joints, and the faster they can bring you the food, generally the worse the worse the quality of that food will be. So in other words, it won't be good for your long-term health to fill the gap right now, to ensure that you are full. Yeah, it does that really well, but when you look at the long-term results, it's not that great. And if you look at things that really are worthwhile, the win isn't sometimes it's not right now, it is in the long term. And so the next form of the deal, and the one that is harder to sell, is the win-win. And the reason why it's hard is because it doesn't appeal to to our desire to be immediately gratified. And as a result of that, it becomes more difficult to sell that kind of deal to people. Nonetheless, you need to be able to do that, because if you can't engage people in a win-win fashion, and you're constantly engaging them in the win-lose fashion, then what will end up happening is that all of those relationships that you build, they will all start to falter and fail in the long term. In the short term, it will be great, but in the long term, not so much. It's like when you hang out with people who like to party, who like that immediate gratification. They're really fun to be with, but in the long term, you'll find that you spent all your money on frivolous things, or you've spent all your money partying, and when you need to be paying your rent, you find that you've spent it all, which isn't very wise. Immediate gratification, excellent, but in terms of the long term, not so much. But the win-win scenario would be like, I liken that to hanging out with people who are very responsible. Sometimes not a lot of fun in the short term, but when you look at the value that you derive from hanging out with them, you start learning about managing your money better, being able to pay your rent whenever your rent is due, being able to get the things that you want to save, that you've been saving for a long time. And those are the benefits of developing a win-win type of deal, or developing a win-win type of mentality. The no deal also does have, it's not the situation that we really want to get into, but it does have its benefits as well. And one of the major benefits is that you never get into, if you do engage in the no deal when someone presents you with a win-lose scenario, the benefit of that is that you don't get exploited, is that you don't experience that immediate gratification with the consequences at the end. So you skip all of that and you're like, well, okay, I'm going to look for something else. Then there's the last thing. Why is it so hard to develop the win-win mentality? Now I've already touched on some of that, but these are the three main reasons that I have found. The first one being that the highest values or the highest virtues are the most difficult to come by. They require a lot of effort and they require a lot of time. And both of those things are things that we don't really like. Difficult things, we don't really enjoy that. However, when you put in the time, when you spend the time to develop those highest virtues, it pays off in the end. And that's one of the main things to developing a winning mentality. The next thing is to realize what the genuine low-hanging fruit are, because there are things that you can do in the short term that will move you closer to your goal, but that won't have any negative side effects. And then the third thing is to understand and know what your values are. Often when people come up with this win-lose mentality, I found that they tend to come up with deals or enter into deals that are not in line with their value system. And that results in a whole lot of problems. So you know what's right, you know what's wrong, you know what you appreciate, you know what you like, you know what you value, but then you put those values aside and you start entering into deals with people that are questionable, that go against the very fabric of who you are and what you are. So when you understand those three things about yourself, developing the highest virtues, when you are able to identify the genuine low-hanging fruit, and when you have your long-term and your short-term goals, when those are congruent with your value system, then you will find that you are able to do things, to structure your social interactions in such a way that you are always winning, and that you always ensure that the person that you are dealing with will win. And that's all good and well, but how do we go about doing it? What is the roadmap for developing that win-win mentality? What I have found is that the best way to develop this winning mentality is to break up your goals into short-term goals, longer-term goals, and then all of those in order to achieve your main objective or your main goal. And this isn't rocket science, I'm not introducing anything new here. However, what I have found is that if you follow a particular methodology if you follow a particular methodology with regards to these three areas, it makes it easier to develop that winning mentality. So the first thing is that you need to identify what those, so your short-term goals, you need to identify what those genuine low-hanging fruit are. So you use your short-term goals to build the momentum, to build what I call fleeting confidence. It's not the confidence that's gonna allow you to do anything beyond just getting to the next level. So what that fleeting confidence is, for instance, when you think of baking a cake, you need a recipe and you need ingredients. Without the ingredients, you can't build the cake. And that's what the fleeting confidence is. It's just allowing you to get to the next thing. It allows you, it helps you to build that momentum so that you can move on to achieving your longer term goals. And your longer term goals, that will be, once you are able to start achieving those, that will build lasting confidence. So let's come back to that baking a cake scenario. When you bake the cake, okay, so now you've decided, okay, I'm gonna bake a cake. You have your recipe, but you don't have the ingredients. So you go to the store and you buy the ingredients. And the only thing that buying the ingredients does for you is that it helps you to get to the next step where you actually start baking the cake. So then when you start baking the cake, now one of the things I know that happens with cake baking is that they ask you to separate the egg yolks from the whites. And when you are able to do that, so now you're following along the tutorial and you're able to separate it. And that in its that does take some doing. Not everybody can do it. I've tried and I have been able to do it, and so I have some idea of what I'm talking about there. So when you're able to do that, you are then able to go on to the next phase of baking a cake. And as you are following along in the tutorial or in the recipe, and you find that what you are doing is in line with what they say you should be experiencing, you find that builds confidence. It makes you confident to move on to the next phase. Because if at any phase along that process of baking the cake, if you find that you're flopping, you would have to start all over again. And for some people, that means I've reached the end of the road the minute I experience a failure. And that is when you should persist. That is when you should carry on. You don't give up when things start falling apart and saying, okay, fine, you know what? The easy thing to do will be for me to just go out and buy a cake. No, continue. Try again. Try until you make it past that point. And of course, if you've tried 10,000 times, then and you feel like, all right, maybe I should try something else. Maybe baking a cake isn't for you. However, when you as you progress and you find that you're following along in the instructions or the tutorial, and you find that what you are doing is in line with what they say it should look like, you find that builds your confidence. So every phase of the journey, and then eventually you get to the point where you have your cake, and now you think, okay, this is amazing, this is fantastic, I like the way it looks. And then you have your first bite and you realize that it is as dry as the Sahara Desert. And what do? At this point, some people give up. Most people would, and you would be sane to do that. However, the gold doesn't lie there. If you carry on and you say, right, I'll try again next time, and the next time you go out, you buy the ingredients, and that helps you to start the process again, the short-term goals, and then you start baking the cake, and this is your longer-term goals. You get to the end of the process and you find that maybe after doing this 3 or 4 times that you can actually eat it, and you think that it tastes pretty good, and then you share it with your friends or your family, and maybe they don't like cake number 5 and 6 and 7, but each time that you did it, they maybe would say something a bit more positive about how the cake is now improved a bit. And then eventually you get to the point where you share it with your friends and family, and everybody enjoys it. And this is now where you experience happiness, where you experience lasting happiness. And this is the most difficult thing to achieve, to get to the end of the process and finally achieve your entire goal. And this is, for me, is what I found, the way in which I found that you build your that you get to the point where you develop that winning mentality is by realizing that you need to have your short-term goals, you need to have your longer-term goals, and you need to have your the ultimate thing that you are aiming for, and that you don't give up at any particular stage in the journey. You have to persist and you have to carry on until eventually you achieve your goal. So in today's episode, the thing that I've dealt with is developing that winning mentality. How do you do it? What are the three types of deals that we get? And we've seen that the three types of deals are the win-win, the win-lose, and the no deal. The second thing that we've seen is that it's very difficult to present, to sell. Often it's very difficult to sell the win-win proposition, but it can be done. Win-lose is easy, but it doesn't benefit you in the long run. The win-win benefits everybody in the long run, and if you can't get the win-win, then maybe it's time to say no deal. And then the last thing that we've seen is why developing a winning mentality is so difficult. And the reasons for that is that the highest virtues are the most difficult to achieve often, and they require the most time. Secondly, that you need to find the genuine low hanging fruits, and you need to understand what your values are. And once you have all of that, then you need to develop that roadmap, and you need to ensure that your long-term and short-term goals, that all of those are congruent with your values. So that roadmap then becomes knowing what your short-term goals are and using those short-term goals to build momentum and to create fleeting confidence. The next thing is have you understand what your longer term goals are, and those longer term goals will build more lasting confidence. And then finally, to have your main goal, your main objective in mind, and once you are able to achieve that, that is when you will experience happiness. This is Jax, and thank you for watching this episode of Bellucci Studios, and I hope to see you guys again in the next video. If you haven't already, please do like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next episode. Cheers.